It is so good to see everybody and welcome. Tonight is our first session of the Living Our Faith discussion. My name is Barb Peterson and I'm the coordinator. It is now my pleasure to introduce Azra, and she is the president and co-founder of the Islamic Speakers Bureau. ISBA just celebrated its 22nd anniversary through the efforts of Azra and her team. Her dedication and vision have been the driving forces behind ISBA's success. She is also the founder, or one of the founders, of the Scottsdale Mosque, where she spent 8 years on the board. Azra has spent the past 29 years educating about Islam and Muslims. Azra trains speakers, plans and facilitates educational and creative interfaith events for ISBA. So welcome, Azra.
Thank you so much, Barb. That's quite a bit. I was hoping for a two-liner, but thank you. Good evening, everyone. Salam, shalom, peace. I'm so delighted that everyone was able to join us. Some friends we know, some new friends we're hoping to make tonight. This is very exciting. For those of you who were part of Salam High Paradise for the past couple of decades, you will recognize that this is our, the format is very much the same. This is probably going to be the equivalent of Salam High Paradise version 2.0, going into virtual presentations and stuff. So this is going to be very exciting. I know Barb is going to take over from me and explain to you how the evening's going to work, but I just want to take a couple of minutes and welcome every single one of you. Thank you so much. And I'm actually very excited because Salam High Paradise and this tri-faith discussion has been something I've enjoyed for a while now, and a lot of new friends and a lot of people that, you know, we've come to regard as family. So welcome again, everyone.
Well, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's going to happen tonight. We have 3 scholars with us, and each one will give a 10-minute presentation on tonight's topic, which is what do we fear and how does our faith help us? After the 3 scholars have concluded their presentations, you will be assigned to a breakout room where you are to discuss the presentations and how this knowledge fits in with your life of faith. After the 30 minutes, you will be rejoined to the main group where you can ask questions of the scholars. If you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you, or Azra will call on you. Please state your name and your congregation. Please frame your remarks in the form of a question and keep them brief, as we have many people here tonight and we want to honor our time. Once the questions and answer section has been completed, we will ask for input on how we can do better and request any topics for future discussions. Our next session will be in November, and we'll kind of go over that a little bit. And Azra will be giving the closing remarks, and Pastor David Felton will be giving our closing prayer. Our session will then conclude. Now, our scholars will be introduced in the order of presentation from the oldest religion to the youngest. We're going to start out with Rabbi Elana Kanter, who is a graduate of Barnard College, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. In addition to her work as co-rabbi at the New Shul Synagogue in Scottsdale, Arizona, she serves as the founding director of the Women's Jewish Learning Center. Welcome, Rabbi Elana.
Thank you.
Pastor David Felton is a graduate of Arizona State University, Boston University School of Theology, and chaplaincy training at Good Samaritan Regional Medical Center. He is the pastor of the Fountains Church in Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome, Pastor David.
Good to be with you.
And our third speaker is Sheikh Didmar Faja, who completed his primary Islamic education in Albania and secondary education in Turkey, where he earned the authorization to be Imam and Khatib. Sheikh Didmar is Imam of the United Islamic Center of Arizona and Glendale, Arizona. Welcome, Sheikh Didmar. Rabbi Elana Kanter will now have the opening prayer and be the first discussion presenter.
Okay. May God open our hearts tonight to be able to really listen to each other and hear each other, and hear even the unspoken words, the voices behind the words, as we gather here together and forge bridges together. I think this topic is so timely. So I want to congratulate whoever came up with the idea of speaking about this. And so our topic is, what do we fear, and how does our faith help us? And I want to start with a brief story. I used to teach high school, taught for about 10 years. And one day I was in my classroom and I was actually waiting for the head of school to come and observe me. You know, she would take notes and give me some feedback. And I was very nervous about it. And so a colleague of mine pops his head in and he says, he says hello, and I tell him I'm nervous. And he says, what are you nervous about? And I said, well, she's coming to see, and, how's my teaching going to be? And, and so on and so forth. And then I said to him, does that get you scared? Does that make you scared? And he said, no, not things like that. So I said, well, what kinds of things make you scared? And he said, I get a bit scared when I think that I may have hurt someone's feelings. Mm. And I thought to myself, that is truly something worth being afraid of. The visit by the head of school was not. But what I learned from my colleague in that interchange was that there are more productive fears and less productive fears. And it can help us to identify which ones are worthwhile and which ones are not. So I want to give you a framework for different kinds of fear in Judaism. And we talk about 3 different kinds of fear. The lowest kind of fear is the fear of punishment. In other words, what I fear is not the action that I'm about to do or the results of that action. And this fear is the lowest kind because it's all about me. Will I be punished? Will I experience pain? What will happen to me if I do something wrong? And I'm not really thinking about other people and the consequences of my actions. And that fear may motivate me to do the right thing. But it's ideally, it's not exactly the most expansive way of feeling that fear. And I thought I'd give an example about this. Many of us, I hope, choose to obey the speed limit. But in that lowest kind of fear, the reason that I choose to obey the speed limit is because I know I'll have to sit in driving school for hours, and that will be painful. And so I don't want to cause myself that pain. So it's a very kind of self-absorbed fear. The second level of fear is called yirat ha'chet, the fear of sin. And this is a little bit more outward thinking because I'm thinking about how this particular choice might impact the lives of others. In other words, if I'm going to make a bad choice, I'm thinking about the consequences. I'm thinking about the implications of this sin. And then I'm also thinking about the consequences to myself, but not so much about pain as about my character. Is my soul going to be intact after I commit this action? So really, it's the action itself, not the punishment that I may get for it, that is the motivating factor. The cost to myself in a less tangible way, worrying about what kind of person really am I, and how that choice impacts other people, the fear of sin. And so if I'm using that driving analogy in this case, in this second level, I'll choose to obey the speed limit, not only because of the pain that it will cause me, but because of the danger that I create for other people through this choice, through this sin that I am committing. I'm endangering them, and I'm endangering my own soul. And I think to myself, I don't want to be the kind of person who puts people in danger. That's the fear of sin. I don't want to be associated with that action. And then there's the highest level of fear, and that's called yirat haromamut. And here it's translated as awe/fear, and it's fear of the majesty. What does that mean? This is the fear that takes us out of ourselves and has us put on God's glasses, and we try to see the world the way God sees the world. That's the majesty. The fear and the awe comes from being able to see the big picture, the vastness of God and the vastness of the world.
Last time I checked, and quite frankly, I'm not really.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Could everyone please mute themselves if they're not speaking, especially when the speakers are there? Thank you so much.
So I have a sense of the greatness, not just of God, but of this, of humanity and of the world. And what I recognize is that humanity and the world and God, it's all interconnected. And when I put it in that context, I don't want to make a bad choice, because God and humanity and our world are depending on me to do right by them. So yirat haromamut, this fear of the majesty, is the highest level of fear, because it's really not so much concerned with the self anymore. It's really taking in myself as part of the world and so on, yes. But it's really taking the larger picture and being able to think of what I'm doing in that much, much larger context, that majestic context, if you will. So fear of punishment is the lowest, fear of sin is the next level, and fear of the vastness. Those are our three levels of fear. And when identifying, when we ask ourselves the question, what am I afraid of? What we hope is that we're spending time in those upper two levels, right? The ones that are thinking about other people and not just about the self. And so I want to pause and then just talk about one specific fear. Maybe it's the fear of all fears. And that is the fear of death. Maybe one of the most famous lines from the Hebrew Bible that many, many people are familiar with, because it's used at funerals very often. It's from Psalm 23, and it says, Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This fear of mortality, right? This is the shadow of death, the valley of the shadow of death. This is actually the highest kind of fear. It's fear of the vastness from which we came and the vastness to which we will return. And what I'm not actually addressing here is, a lot of us may be afraid of the circumstances under which we will die. This is not that. What I'm thinking of in terms of the fear of death is the idea of contemplating that we're here now, but there will be one day where we are no longer here. And when we contemplate how fragile we are, something positive happens. And that is, we start a journey toward making our lives mean something. The fear of mortality in this sense, it's not a morbid thing, it's actually a good thing. we recognize that our lives are finite, that they had a beginning and they will have an ending. And that motivates us to make our lives a blessing to ourselves, to others, and to the world around us. So really the best thing that we can do with that knowledge of our mortality, even that fear about our mortality, is to make sure that our life matters, that our time spent on earth will have made a difference, that we took good and worthy care of the life God entrusted into our care. And in that sense, fear of the vastness can lend meaning to our lives. So I want to pause there so that we can hear from the other speakers. But as you might guess, it's, you know, so very much the tip of the iceberg. And hopefully a lot more will come through questions and discussion.
Thank you, Rabbi Kanter. Pastor David Felton.
Wow, Rabbi Elana, you remind me of why I want to be a rabbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I begin, I just want to offer this one caveat that I am a hopelessly biased representative of Christianity. And that is because there are multiple approaches to Christianity operating in the world. And I am a representative of one very narrow practice of Christianity. I just finished a series inspired by another Christian theologian, Kurt Struckmeyer, where he really laid it out really well. And he said that part of the challenge of Christianity today is that there are two major strains. One is a gospel about Jesus, and one is a gospel of Jesus. The gospel about Jesus is all about fear. And the other one, the gospel of Jesus, has a sense of deep theological integrity. Yeah, so I'll pat myself on the back, right? Because we're trying to avoid fear because we believe that scaring people into belief is pretty manipulative. And so I'm operating out of a handicap here that most people who are even just kind of vaguely familiar with Christianity are going to be familiar with the Christianity that is all about fear. So let me tell you just a little bit about these two. The conservative or traditional Christians are all about that lower kind of fear that Rabbi Elana just talked about, all about fear and punishment. Traditional Christian theology, from my perspective, and that includes evangelical, mainline, and Roman Catholic, took a hard wrong turn a long time ago. Excuse me. And really became fixated on original sin, which is not in the Bible, believing in creeds, which Jesus didn't advocate, and obsessing on a deeply toxic purity culture. They're afraid that sin, and whatever that sin is usually made up of whatever particular prejudice that particular Christian has, or incorrect belief is going to send them to a literal hell. More progressive Christians, on the other hand, and this is for the most part, again, I can't speak for everyone, but for the most part, don't believe in a literal hell, or are not fixated on original sin, on creeds, or obsessing about sin, sex-related sin. They are more about participating in what my Jewish sisters and brothers call tikkun olam, more about doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. And we'll give a nod to Micah for that. So that being said, I am afraid of other Christians. misrepresenting what I believe is a more whole and practical expression of what Jesus taught and expected of us. One of the things that I think we all recognize is our culture as a whole right now is a culture of fear. And you may have noticed it in the form of what is now officially a science of what's called clickbait, to get you to click on a particular story online. And the discipline knows that 8 out of 10 people will read your headline, but only 2 out of 10 will actually read the rest of your copy. And what's been learned is that what we use to define a good headline now is not facts. Facts fail miserably as clickbait. So terrifying headlines are the goal. Misleading headlines are the goal. Headlines that can be taken in a variety of ways are the goal. So today, instead of facts, headline writers try to stir up emotions. And you pretty much will probably be able to guess the 3 emotions that headline writers are taught to evoke in order. They are greed, fear, and anger. There's an ad man named Dylan Bird who says in a particular article, how to sell using fear. He says, fear is persuasive. It's automatic and to some extent out of our control. It's built into our operating system as human beings, as a defense mechanism from deep in our primal past, when the most important question was, can I eat it, or can it eat me? So fear gets people to take action. And so what I'm afraid of is that the vast majority of my fellow Christians are using that kind of fear to manipulate people into actions that actually do the opposite of what I feel Jesus' message was all about. I know those of you who know me are going to be shocked that I'm actually going to mention the Bible. Do you know what the most common command in the Bible is? It's not about money. It's not about heaven or hell. It's not about sex. It's not about hypocrisy. Anytime you have an angel or anything heavenly being show up in the story, it will always begin with one command. And Rabbi Elana knows what it is. It's be not afraid. I lost count after 400 mentions of be not afraid. That's it. Fear not. Don't be afraid. Chill, calm down, relax, variations of that. But it doesn't stop there. Theologian Rob Bell points out that almost inevitably, the be not afraid in the Bible is followed by God has something important for you to do. And that's exactly what Rabbi Elana was saying as the highest form of fear. It's kind of that motivating fear to get you off your duff. Whatever the setting, whatever the trauma, God doesn't indulge the hearer with, oh, everything's going to be all right. Don't you worry. I'll take care of it. No, that doesn't happen. It's more like, stop your whining. You've got a world to heal here. You only get a few years, so get up and get to work. That's usually the context. When somebody is faced with something that they're afraid of, they get the message, don't be afraid and get to work. So in the end, even in the face of whatever we are confronted with, uncertainty, terror, we have to ask, what kind of world are we making? And I think that that's the sacred gift that is trying to be drawn out of us that fear is really a motivator to get us to find out, how do I make the world a less fearful place? There's a quote that is often associated with Nelson Mandela. It's actually a quote from Marianne Williamson in her Return to Love book that some of you might be familiar with. Some of you might be able to just recite it along with me. It's a pretty familiar quote. She writes, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." So that's much more the kind of direction I want to lean into when we're thinking about fear, and not to slide into that lowest form of fear that is all about manipulating people and scaring people. That's a very immature, manipulative way of being that, again, sadly, many of my colleagues in the Christian tradition have as their number one tool to try and get people to do what they think they should do. So let me just finish with a quote from 1 John 4:18, where the author says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." And it's important to remember that in the Koine Greek in which that's written, the perfect is teleos, which means whole, complete. And so there is no fear in love. Complete love, whole love casts out fear. And so that's the message I would hope that we would be able to take away from the Christian tradition. Sadly, it has been, there's been a deviation from that tradition, but I want to keep holding on to the idea that love will conquer fear and make that message the focus of what we do, because that's going to help us get along with one another a lot better than the fear of sin and punishment. So thanks.
Thank you, Pastor David. Imam Didmar?
Imam, you're muted still.
Can you hear now?
Very good.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. All praise is due to God, and may his peace and his blessings be upon all of his prophets and messengers and all the righteous people, including our Prophet Muhammad, his family members, his companions, and all of those who followed his way of life. And I want to thank you, Mr. Azra, for putting together this beautiful program. I want to thank Rabbi Elana and also Father David for being here present and sharing their insights and their knowledge from their respected religions. And this is indeed one of the most important topics that you have asked us to talk about, because this can either a wrong understanding of fear or hope in our religion can lead people to extremes. There are some people who have hope, and there's nothing but hope in regards to what's going to happen to them after they die, or in relationship with their Lord. They have nothing but hope that God is going to forgive them. God is so merciful to them. In other words, they are doing the right thing. So that could be a wrong approach, and I'll tell you why later on. Just be patient with me. Don't judge me right away. And then you have the second category of people who are all about being punished or living in fear. Like, if I don't do this, God is going to be really upset with me. God is going to punish me. God is going to disconnect from me. And because of that fear, often they disconnect completely from religion, from community, and they have no hopes at all. And some of them may live a miserable life. Some of them may do crimes, all kind of bad stuff. And often it is related to that lost hope because of fear. Interestingly, in our religion, when you reflect on the Quranic verses, because that is our essence, that's our source where we go to find guidance and to find the way how we need to live our lives. And also when you look at the narrations of our Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, you will find that hope and fear are very important for the development, for the spiritual development of the individual in this world. And as a matter of fact, many scholars, when they talk about these two different phenomena, they say, or they compare hope and fear like a bird that flies with two wings. If you have only one wing, you cannot fly. Therefore, you need to have two wings. Both of them, they play an important role in our life. And the ultimate goal, I will give you the ultimate goal that is requested from a believer or advice that the believer has in this world, ultimately is to reach the love of God. If the believer reaches the love of God, he or she has surpassed the level of hope and fear at that point. Now, when we reflect about these two phenomena in the Quran, you will find verses talking about hope. For example, God says in Surat Al-Zumar, it is one of the chapters towards the middle of the Quran, actually a little bit towards the end, but it's close to the middle. It says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Say, and he's saying this to Prophet Muhammad to tell the people, say, all my servants who have transgressed themselves, not to lose hope, not to lose hope from the mercy of God. Indeed, God is the one who forgives all the sins. So this verse and so many other verses, I don't need to go through all the other verses that talk about hope, but this is a very clear verse that talk about not losing the hope and being a person who hopes in the mercy of God, to be forgiven, hopes in the mercy of God so God can show mercy in this world, hopes in the mercy and the forgiveness of God to be among the people of paradise in the hereafter. And then, but at the same time, we find verses in the Quran where God also talks about fear, where he says, do not fear them. Now, we're dealing with believers at the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when, especially in the initial stages, when they were very afraid from those who were attacking them. Just as it was the case with Moses, with Jesus, and with so many other prophets of God, where they were rejected by their own society for many years. Of course, they had their own followers, but at the same time, they were discriminated. They were, so they suffered so much under the oppression of the oppressors in their time. So God instructs Prophet and the believers by saying, do not fear them. meaning do not fear these oppressors who are, harming you. Instead, fear me, he says. And interestingly, he says, fear me so I can complete my bounties on you. I can send you bounties, I can send you blessings in a complete way. And also for you to find guidance as well. In other words, fear me so I can complete my blessings or my bounties on you, and also you will find that guidance as well. This is Surat Al-Baqarah. It is the second chapter from the Quran, verse number 150. So again, where do we go with these? We have verses about hope, verse about fear. We talk about these two being like the wings of the bird, and very important for the individual to have them in the life. But I also told you that, ultimately you want to reach the level of love where you are actually going forward and you're going beyond these two states, these two spiritual states or constant states that we have to be in this worldly life. Scholars, they also talked about being able to balance fear and hope together, meaning many people at the beginning, when they start practicing religion, they can go through some stages of fear, because for them to understand or to reach the level of love right away without being afraid that if they, for example, if they object the commands of God, there can be punishment. There can be punishment in this world and there can be punishment in the hereafter. We don't hide these facts because it is not us who legislated these things in the Quran. So there are punishments for sure, just as there are punishments when you break the law out there, traffic laws or whatever laws there are. However, people normally, once they come to learn more and more, they become more hopeful in the mercy of God, in the forgiveness of God. And then as a result of that, they end up reaching this spiritual state of love, as I said earlier, where they are above the fear and hope as well. But as I said, for many people, these two states, they play an important role. And I would say, I would also talk about fear in a sense that Muslims, they have some practices that are different from other traditions out there. For example, if a Muslim commits a sin, for example, there are punishments about that sin. Of course, God will forgive every sin. But if you are unaware of the punishment of that sin, then the individual will just keep sinning and say, you know what, God is going to forgive me. I can just sin all the time, right and left, and God is just going to forgive me. And we don't want to create that, that idea that we hear often, people saying like, oh yeah, just do whatever because you're all forgiven. As long as you have faith in you, you're all forgiven. And we have seen individuals do that. Like, they would do a lot of things throughout the week, and then all of a sudden they go one day in the house of worship, they ask for forgiveness, and they think that they're all forgiven, and let's just keep doing exactly the same thing next week again. So in our tradition, it doesn't work like that. There is the concept of a person, for example, committing a sin, a particular sin. There are consequences for that sin. Therefore, you as an individual, you have to live with that consciousness as well. And again, as I said, it is very important to balance between hope and fear in order to live a righteous life. But I want to end it with this again, saying that many people, they, especially those who are more seasoned in religion, those who are more righteous, and I'm not saying angels, because we have no angels walking on the face of the earth. We have sinners. We're all, we all have our shortcomings and we all have our mistakes that we commit on a daily basis. But those who are more seasoned in religion, those who are, more seasoned by performing righteous deeds often, they they migrate from these two states and they are more connected to, as I said, to love for God. And that is also mentioned in the Quran, where God says in the Quran, يُحِبُّهُمْ وَيُحِبُّونَ. He loves them. He talks about righteous nation. He talks about those good people. And he says that he loves them and they love him. So you have this concept of love as well introduced in the Quran. And this is, like I said, a higher level of those who deserve God's love. And they're not necessarily just struggling so much between these two states, between hope and fear. But I personally believe that it's very important, especially for people, when they start practicing their religion, to be in between these two states, to be cautious, to live with cautiousness about these two important states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam Didmar. What we will be doing now is going to be going into our breakout sessions. I would appreciate if you would just think about how your faith helps you when you are afraid, and take that discussion to your groups, and then we will meet for 30 minutes. We'll break out until approximately 10 after, and then we will come back to the main group and do a quick debrief and see if there's any kind of new things that comes up in your group. So anyways, I'm going to let Joe break you out into the groups. And here we go. Just hit the join button. We are now the main group. So welcome back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Group 7.
Is
I was
everyone
grouped. Yeah.
okay? Here comes a few more people.
I'm still trying to get my video to work and it still doesn't. So I'm sorry.
There we go.
Technology is such a challenge nowadays. But anyways, welcome back. Now, what did you learn? Any new things that came out of your groups?
Yeah, we're all afraid.
I think we have all that in common, right?
Of something.
Or something, yeah. So let's start with group 1. Any kind of thing you want to share? Just make it brief, or do you have a question of any of the speakers?
Group 1 is the speakers.
Oh, sorry, group 1. Let's try group 2.
Who is group 2?
No takers.
It was let's see, Edward Casper, Lisa Bannon, Roy Pedersen, Lyle Peterson, Jennifer Hill Sprague, Dachi Jasser, Khan, and Pam Poley.
There were actually only 5 of us,
Okay.
but that was good. And I personally, and Lisa, I think you should also any of you should weigh in, but I think we find that we have so much more in common with how we look at God and fear, and that we see a God as a God of love.
I think that's great to have that commonality between all 3 major religions. I think that's wonderful. Any other questions or any other insights out of group 2?
One thing I got out of people from various traditions is that you have a choice in how you face the day with its uncertainties. You can choose light and joy. You can choose fear, but you can make the best of it. And that was reassuring to hear from the group.
Good. So let's move on to group 3. If you know which ones you are, and do you have any questions for the speakers or any brief comments? Any insights?
Well, our group, we had a really great discussion, and we came out very similar to group 2 in that we love the Islamic Speakers Bureau for getting us all together and to realize our commonalities, that we have way more in common than our differences. We also talked about choosing that God walks with us no matter what path our life may take. Anybody else from our group want to comment?
Well, we also talked about the fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, and because a lot of people stay with people who walk and talk and sound just like them. And the purpose here tonight is to reach out to people who don't know, who we never come across. And you have to make the effort to find the commonality among all of us.
I had one comment that I felt bothered me, and it's always bothered me, that when we get together like this, we see how much we have in common. And yet, if you look back at our history, more people have been, it's one God, but more people have died because my God is better than your God. Yes. And that to me is frightening. That aspect of it is really frightening.
So we also talked the fact that now during a religious service, you reach out and touch someone physically, for the idea of feeling that we are all here together, especially during this pandemic time, the idea of we are not alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. This is just amazing to me to have all this commonality and, thinking the same. Group 4, questions for the speakers or just general comments?
Remind me who was in group 4. I've forgotten what group number I was. I think maybe it was 7.
I was in group 4 with Dan and Greta, and then Miriam. It was just us for a little bit, and we had a discussion about fear, and then a little introduction time, because for me it was the first time coming to this type of event. I find it wonderful. I think that we're all of us coming together like this, and the discussions are so very beneficial. And what we'd come to by the end of all of us discussing was pretty much that in all of our faiths that we often use prayer to sort of act as that salve for fear. And when we do find ourselves scared and afraid, then we pray. And gratitude solves a lot too. Mm-hmm. If anybody else, Miriam, if you'd like to add something, or Dan.
Yeah, I was in group 6, beginning with Dorothy and with Sohail, and then Dorothy and I were switched over to group 4. And for me, it was about how I go to prayer, and I go through steps, like calm myself down and go to prayer, whether it's internally or the physical action of the prayer for a Muslim, and different tools that I use for fear, specifically regarding current events and schooling for my grandchildren. And since I don't live in state with them, talking with my daughter-in-law and my son about the tools that they have gone through to keep the grandchildren safe in different ways. And that helps dissipate my fear. But prayer was, prayer was top of the list. And I really appreciated everything that everyone's input in the 2 groups that I was in, especially each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
How about 5? Any questions or insights?
I just wanted to say one thing, that this idea of Zoom has made something like this. Of course, we're in Woodstock, New York. We're all the way across country. And the thing is, until a year ago, to me, Zoom meant going fast. That was about it.
Good insight, Stan. Good insight. Any other? All right. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering who's in group 5.
Let's see. It was Nancy Splain, Stephen Olson, Marianne Muir, Ronak Naqshbani, Barbara Thomas James, Deborah Barr, and Carrie Robbins, and Sandy, let's see, Thron?
Yeah, Sandy's right here.
Okay.
And Sandy, who did you have with you? And Barbara, there you go.
Am I on?
Yes.
You're on.
One of the things, I feel really bad. I had trouble getting into the webinar tonight, so I totally missed what the rabbis shared. I'll have to watch the recording. And I only caught the very end of what Pastor David said, but I've heard him for many years, so I can guess. But when the imam was talking and about we kind of got into the development of a person coming into a faith. And it seemed to me that of the three faiths, people in that group that were of each faith, we saw a lot of similarity in the early converts and or whatever you want to call it, early practitioners, and then kind of moving to the next level and then moving up to the next level. And you see the commonalities there, the similarities in concepts, and that's good. That's good.
Okay. All right, before anything else, before we kind of go into the next section, any other questions, or maybe some of the scholars have any last thoughts that they would like to share with us?
Was there a room 7?
Yes, there was a room 7.
I missed you.
Yes. I, Karen Oates, and Linda Brock, and Jeff Heimer, Lubena Fawcett, and Steve and Linda, whose last names I did not absorb, sorry, were in that room. And we had a wide-ranging discussion. And one of the things that struck me was Lubena brought up that in Islam, there is a strong tradition around accountability. And that's accountability for your actions and understanding that there is a punishment for sin, basically, or any infractions against the commandments or rules. And so consequently, I guess there's, and she talked about the two wings of fear and hope that Imam Didmar had discussed in his presentation, and defended a constructive role for fear in causing you to remember that you are accountable and will have to deal with consequences of whatever sin you commit, which then brought me back around to thinking about that side of Christianity that Pastor Felton described, that the conservative fundamentalist part of Christianity that believes in original sin. And then consequently, I think that almost theologically sets up a foundational base of chronic fear, sort of generalized, diffuse anxiety, as opposed to a specific fear that's, spelled out, there's a particular sin, there's a particular consequence. The whole idea of original sin being sort of nebulous and universal sets people up, I think, for almost chronic anxiety or chronic fear that's probably not healthy psychologically, in my opinion. But so consequently, I agree with Pastor Felton's other branch of Christianity that is not based on that set of theological underpinnings. But there was, within Islam, there was a more specific, defined concept of fear related, to specific punishments, not a generalized culpability sort of thing.
Thank you. I'm looking for any other questions. Okay. Well, since this was our first meeting, I want to know, what can we do better? Or if you have any comments or suggestions for the group, and also for topics that you would like to see addressed in this sort of a format. We will love to have your input into that. And I think it would make it, our sessions a lot better. But anyone have any input for that or topics you want? Yeah, Pam.
Actually, I don't have any input or anything. I just want to say hi to Betty and Stan because it's been a good 2 years since I've seen them.
Hello,
Last
Nikki.
time was the last in-person women's tea. So it's really good to see you. And I hope one of these days you can get back to Arizona and we can all get together again.
We did a topic several years ago that I don't remember what year it was. We did one on the different religions aspect on welcoming the stranger. And that I thought was really a great session because of the approach and the commonality. And I don't know if it's something you would want to repeat because I don't know how many years ago we did it. And this seems like we've got a different group here to start with, so it might work. I have to tell you, the first time we came to this was at the Methodist Church. And we came there and we came with another Jewish couple and the four of us sat together.
And Azra came up to us and said, you can't.
No, she didn't say that. She said, you should be sitting with others. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And then when they broke the group up, I had to walk over to another table and say, do you need a Jew over here?
Yeah, we became the wandering Jews.
Dan and Cleta, you have a question or a suggestion?
Well, I think the idea of welcoming the stranger it will cut across everybody.
It's true.
And especially in this time of the pandemic where we have to—
Things are stranger and stranger.
Right, we have to relearn how to welcome each other.
Right.
In a new way. In a new way.
Thank you. Thank you. Cleta?
I don't think we could probably do it on Zoom, but I have long wanted to sometime have a session when we can all be together where we shared the art from our religions, the art and the music of our different faiths. I think that would be so rich. I would just love that.
Sounds good.
Great idea. Thank you. Anyone else?
And food.
Linda Brockheimer.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, hi. I'm going on the assumption that our religions provide a basis for spiritual growth. And so perhaps the topic would be what in our religion gives us the most impetus for spiritual growth.
Good one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I see lots of familiar faces. It's wonderful to see everybody again. But I also see lots of new faces as well.
What to hear.
Yes, so since we have so many new people, I think it's quite reasonable to just go back to the beginning and start over again with the basics, right? The stuff was, we can start and do all the topics all over again. And there's so many new people, they would enjoy going through those topics.
Yeah.
And you would know all the answers.
Wow.
This is not the type of discussion that usually generates specific, discrete answers, I'll tell you.
I think that the conversation just if you just listen to how the different groups talked about was talked about at their what we traditionally would have been our table, right? In this case, our breakout rooms. Everybody went in a different direction. So I think if we went over and did these same topics again, given a different group of people, get different dynamics, we would come away with even different understandings from what we got the last time. There would be value to that.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments or suggestions for the group? Yeah, Pam.
Because I go a long way back with this group. We did one that was really powerful. Well, a couple of them way back when. like about 2005 or something. And of course, it was not long after the Muslim community joined what was then High Paradise. And this anti-Muslim sentiment was extremely strong after 9/11 and all that. And we did one when faith, how did that go now? When faith meets fanaticism. And that was,
boy.
Which one?
Faith fanaticism.
when faith meets fanaticism.
Oh,
And that was really powerful. Also, we did one night that said, what do I not want people to think about, to say about me or my religion?
Yeah.
And those were very, very good ones.
The one about the faith meeting fanaticism, we as the organizer were very particular that like the Jewish community would talk about fanaticism within the Jewish community. The Christian community would talk about it from their perspective, and so there wouldn't be any, conflict there.
Yeah.
But each group was bringing it forward from their point of view and saying fanaticism within their own faith tradition.
we go after our own. We go after our own, not after somebody else.
Exactly. So
Because we all have them.
Oh, really?
Hey, I think I'd like to suggest a follow on to what Jeffrey was mentioning about the spiritual growth aspect of it. And I would be interested, I know that for me, right now doing a series on Julian of Norwich and just kind of exploring that whole mystical tradition. And so many of my people are like, I've never heard of her. And it's just an amazing journey together. It might be fun to get 3 scholars or representatives together and have each one of us prepare a little bit on a mystic or other someone who has influenced us that, everybody else might not know about. I, of course, would be using Jewish mystics and Sufi mystics. So I'm cross-pollinated, but I just think that it would be really fun to say, hey, here's someone you all need to know about from my tradition. And I just think that there would be a lot of commonality there, and it would help us all get a different perspective on what, in essence, is a human experience that we're all having.
Just to piggyback on your idea, it would be good to get a book list before the Zoom so that we could read up on people that are going to be discussed and form our own opinions and then see if they mesh with everybody else's.
Good idea. Thank
Homework. Now we're getting homework.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's late for you guys. Yeah. Pam.
I was going to say, there's actually, we were actually working on trying to have a Salam High Paradise session on mysticism from the 3 faiths.
Yes.
When everything kind of came to a halt.
Caved in.
Yeah, we went into sabbatical. Also, there is a book that's kind of fun to read. It's a hypothetical conversation between a Jewish mystic, I'm trying to think, Moses de Leon, I can't remember the 3 guys, but the title of the book is 3 Mystics Walk into a Tavern. And
that's a good joke. That's a good joke.
Yeah, but and the 3 of them talk from their own 3 perspectives, and it's amazing what the commonality that they find in mysticism in the 3 different faiths.
Yeah,
I have to tell you, I'm just looking through a book that we have, which is the Jewish Book of Why, and asks different questions about the religion. And what you end up with is different rabbis having different opinions. So you don't end up with a real answer. You get, well, the running joke was 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And that's kind of.
Well, I contended the reason why there are so many Jewish comedians is because Sarah laughed. Think about it.
You're going to love this for the next time. We're going to be meeting on Tuesday, November 9th at 6 o'clock. This will be our next session. And our topic will be, do we need to defend God?
Oh,
So I think that's going to be a powerful session. And I'm really looking forward to that one. So just put that one in your calendar. And before we're going to have some closing remarks by Azra, and then Pastor David is going to have closing prayer, and then we will close the session. So Azra.
All I'm going to do is be very boring and say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to every single one of you. You know, I was going through a week of having a really rough time because COVID numbers are going up. My little grandson, who's 5, has gone to kindergarten. And Miriam, I know exactly what you're feeling. It is scary as all heck to worry about this little person who you've been protecting by taking all your shots and making sure your whole family took the shots so he was safe. And yet now we've thrown him into a public school where, of course, we've been told no mask mandate and no vaccinated mandate. It's like, yes, every day has been really rough. So with that, seeing all you wonderful, wonderful friends online, and I haven't seen you guys in forever. I've made new friends, although I didn't get a chance to come around the rooms to say hello to everyone. I hope to be able to do that in November. And I'd like to thank our wonderful scholars. Thank you, Rabbi Elana. Thank you, Pastor David. Thank you, Imam Didmar. You guys are awesome, always inspiring. Thank you. And one thing, somebody mentioned art and music in religion. A lot of times when you ask Muslims if there's music as part of their worship, the answer is no. There is no music as part of our formal worship, but we do have the equivalent of hymns and praise, songs of praise for the Prophet Muhammad and for God. And so Imam Didmar would be able to also talk to some topic like that too. So, and Imam, I just threw that at you. So sorry about that. Thank you all very much. Please remember that we are a nonprofit. We do appreciate any amount of donation. It just helps us get our work done. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat room. So if you guys feel inspired, you enjoyed yourself this evening, please, feel free to donate any amount you feel that moves you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. And I'm going to give this back to Pastor David.
Thanks, Azra. I'm going to close with a poem prayer by a notorious colleague of mine. Her name is Greta Vosper. She's notorious because she only a year or so ago was tried for heresy because she is an atheist pastor. That shocks a lot of people, but she has moved into more of the mystical realm, and that just confuses the heck out of a lot of people. But she writes beautiful poetry that I found one in particular that I really feel fits tonight. So here are these words from Greta Vosper's book of poems and poetry called We All Breathe. We live in a world of surprise and beauty, a world of color and complexity, a world of challenge and delight, a world of anxiety and alleluias. We are lifted and fed by the wonder in it, humbled and laid low by its tragic realities. In the interwoven moments of its blessing and blight, we make our lives. May we, in the spaces between sorrow and delight, in the moments between harsh reality and beauty, in the fear that lies in wait between truth and possibility, learn the art of making light, that we might shine with peace and live with hope. Together on this journey, we share what comes with dignity, with grace, and with love. May it ever be so. Amen.
Amen.
So with that, I say shalom, I say peace, I say salam. Until next time, have a great week.